Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you back to this week's episode of the From the Shadows podcast, where we will get back to the bone-chilling interview with native Northwest Ohioans Tim and Charma, who are listeners of this podcast and contacted us to share their experiences of living in a real haunted house for over 10 years. And, as a bonus, the judge shares relevant information about an entity that plagued one of his very own children. Without any more delay, let us return to this eerie interview already in progress where we left off last week.
And so finally one night we took it out of the house and we burned it. Now this is going to be weird. So my brother who lived next door had this beagle and they were on electric shock collars. And so it would never leave the yard because it'd get the hell shocked out of it, right? Because it had these shock collars. The dog, we're out there burning this thing in the driveway, right? And the dog walks right through the electric fence, comes over, and defecates on an open flame. What the? But and the thing about it is,
that sounds like some fraternity party.
And it would not go back. It wouldn't go back to the yard because it didn't want to get shot. So we had to take the shock collar off, throw it over for me to get the dog back. But I'm telling you, I sat there and I watched the dog walk right through the invisible fence, and it came over and it started, sniffing. I'm like, now look, it's not like a bonfire flame, okay? And I'd be god dang if it didn't turn around and defecate right there, right on the flame. And I remember sitting there going, this is the most surreal thing I've ever seen. So that was it, and it was done, and I was, we're good. And so some years go by, and nothing really happens. And then finally, probably the most terrifying experience of my entire life, much more scary than the Dogman encounter, if you can believe that. One day, out of the blue, my youngest would have been probably about 3 years old. Of course, we have a baby monitor. She starts yelling for me, and I come in and I said, what's going on? And she's like, this little boy won't leave me alone. I'm like, well, and I was thinking, well, she don't go to preschool. I was thinking maybe at church or something like that with Sunday school. I said, well, who is he? And she's like, no, he's in the room. And I'm thinking, okay, this is 3-year-old doesn't want to go to bed. She's stalling. She's trying to come up with some reason to stay awake and all this stuff. But it became pretty clear after asking her a few questions that no, she was really seeing something. And that this wasn't a stall tactic or anything like that she was distressed. And I said, well, what's he look like? And she says, well, he's a little boy. He's got basically described blue bibs, which I would probably assume is denim. And he had blonde hair. And I'm like, okay. And I says, well, what does he want? And she says, he wants me to go outside and play. Now it's winter. It's winter. I mean, it's snow on the ground. It's cold. And I said, so now I'm like, okay, because I grew up with weird paranormal stuff that happened. So I said, well, you never go outside ever. And we had a home security system on where if you opened the door, the alarm go off. I said, you never go outside. She goes, no, I'm, basically I'm not going outside. And it was perfectly clear to me that she was not happy with this kid, that was not happy with him. Like this wasn't a playmate or anything like that. So we talked. So finally I said, well, what's his name? And she said, he calls himself Wind. I'm thinking, that's weird, because if she was making this up, it would be Jimmy or Bobby or Bill or somebody, you know what I mean? But the fact, one, it was a boy, okay, and two, it had this name Wind. I'm thinking, she's really seen something, and this something's communicating with her.
Did she say he calls himself, or did she say his name is?
That's a good question now that you asked me that. I cannot remember now. Whether he said that was his name, I can't remember.
Well, the story of the Mothman in Point Pleasant, right. Gallipolis area. There's a story that goes along with that about Woody Derenberger, who encounters this entity, and he calls himself Cold, Cold.
But he didn't say it was his name.
At first, he says, I call myself Cold.
I call myself.
What do you call yourself?
Okay.
And eventually he gave a first name, but at first he just called himself
You know,
Cold.
and my kid being 3 years old, I'm not sure she would have discerned the difference between the nuances there. So that was the first night. And then eventually wind went away and she was able to go to sleep. Well, then it started happening every night. Every night. And he was really persistent. Like, I want you to go outside and play with me. And would bug her, wouldn't let her sleep. And she was distressed. She would cry. She was upset. She really, really irritated. And so this went on for a couple of weeks. And it's like, this is a nightly thing. And, I'm like, I don't know what to do. I mean, because you're completely powerless at this point. Because here's your child that you're supposed to protect. It's my duty as a father to protect this child. And I can't do it because this thing that I can't see is just tormenting the hell out of her. And there's nothing I can do about it. So finally, I told her mom, I said, look, we got to get some respite here. We got to get some sort of break. So why don't you take the girls and go to your mom and dad's who were living in Findlay at the time? I'll stay at the house. We'll, see what happens.
Someone had that big party?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, all right.
So it was a toga party in
I do remember
Rush Week.
I remember that.
Delta House.
That's where the Beagle came.
Right.
Okay.
So they go to Findlay, and sure enough, wind shows up in Findlay.
Oh.
And that's what really, because you're sitting there, when all this was going on, you're thinking to yourself, okay, if I can't get rid of this thing, do I sell my house? Well, I'm not going to be able to sell this house. I just built it. You got all this money sunk into a brand new house. You just can't. You can't just put it up for sale, because then where would you go? You know what I mean? And then how long is it going to take for sale? It took you guys 11 months. And so you're just like, what do you do? And so after we found out that it followed her to Findlay, it was like, well, okay, well, now we know, selling the house, accidentally burning down the fire in a barbecue, none of that's going to work because this thing is transient.
So what happened in Findlay exactly?
Same thing. Showed up, tormented her.
While she's going to sleep.
While she was in bed. Yep, okay. Same thing. So we went to a pastor. I talked to him about it, and he kind of, I gotta be honest, I'm not so sure he believed it. I think he chalked this up as make believe for the kid, that the kid, because he gave me this spiel. Well, I'm not saying she's lying. I think she really believes she's seeing. I'm just like, look, man, this isn't an imaginary friend situation. Okay, this isn't. And so it went on, and finally, you just become, every night you just get anxiety, and your chest gets heavy because you're just waiting for this to happen again. And it was to the point where you just felt completely and totally helpless, and you start researching everything, wind, folklore, Native American spirit, everything I could. I was checking, could not find anything in reference to the name wind. Started looking up fallen angels, demonic spirits, all this different stuff. Can't find anything. Nothing. So finally, it kind of to get to the end of the story, there's more to it. I could go through, nuances of the story, but I don't think those are that important. So finally one night, I'm going up the stairs, and I'm going to go into my bedroom. My daughter's room was adjacent to mine, and it was weird how you walk into angles though. So I walk upstairs, and I'm about to go into my bedroom. I've already read my youngest her nighttime story, got her tucked in. Have a baby monitor on, because I always had the baby monitor on. And even we would carry it downstairs with us, obviously watching TV because it's a 2-story house. Just, always worried. But the baby monitor was still plugged in. It was in my bedroom by the bed. And just as I'm getting ready to go into my bedroom, out of the corner of my eye, I look and I see this little boy wearing blue bibs, just as my daughter had described, blonde hair, just as she described, walks into her bedroom. And I froze. I just froze. I mean, you would think that normal reaction was you would turn and run into the room, and some sort of paternal instinct would kick in, and I'm going to run in there and I'm going to but I didn't. I just froze. It was just one of those things that was so shocking to me. And I think if you remember back, I was talking about my dog man encounter. One of the things I was telling myself is don't look, because I'm scared I'm going to freeze up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, with all the paranormal stuff that you had experienced up to that point, and you still
froze.
Still froze.
Yeah. Because part of me deep down inside wanted to believe that my daughter was making this up. You wanted to believe that there was an explanation, that there really wasn't this entity that was terrorizing my house. But when I saw it, then a million emotions rush over your body, like everything that she said up to this point, totally true. My house is besieged by this entity. I'm totally screwed. So I hear her talking to Wind through the baby monitor, and you could tell they were having a conversation, just like if you were on the cell phone to your friend right now. I couldn't hear your friend's voice, but I could hear your voice, and I could understand what your conversation was based upon your answers. And I knew she was talking to it because she would say something, and then there'd be this pause where she was listening. And I literally just like I said, I was frozen. And then all of a sudden, she's saying things like trying to cast it out, trying to get it to leave, and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, I hear this voice speaking in this language. And it was the most bizarre language I've ever heard. Now, I can't speak Russian. If you were speaking Russian right now, I would have no idea what you're saying. But I might be able to know it was Russian. I don't speak a bit of French, but if you were speaking French or Spanish or Italian or German, I might be able to identify the language, but I couldn't tell you what you were saying. This language was nothing that I'd ever heard. This was something so foreign to me that froze me, like shocked me. And then, so here I think I'm listening to Wind talking to my daughter. And then when I listened closely, I realized that was my daughter talking. I know. She is talking in this, just like this crazy language, whether it's some ancient language that isn't spoken, I didn't know. And when I heard that, when I realized that is when it just like everything, just like my eyes, just like, and then she breaks back into English and says, okay, like, and then there's this pause. And she says, okay, like, okay, we good on this, right? And so I rush into the room, and I'm like, when I walk in the room, I don't know what I'm expecting to see. You know what I mean? Whether this kid's going to be there or some other, this thing's going to take its true form, or I have no idea what it's going to be. And she says very calmly, matter-of-factly, that it's gone. It's not coming back. It's not going to come back. And I'm like, I'm still trying to process all this stuff. And I finally asked her, she had no idea she was talking a different language. She had no idea. So, sure enough, it was gone. I mean, it's gone. And I'm like, I don't know what she said to it, what language she was speaking. Gone. So, it just, that night, it was like this huge relief, but I fully expected the next night for it to show up. And then it's like, okay, I got to try to record my daughter talking in this crazy voice. You know what I mean? And I remember watching this show one time about alien abduction or some craziness, and they had recorded this person talking in this voice, and they brought in a linguist, and they were speaking Sumerian. Well, I'm not saying my daughter was speaking Sumerian or anything like that, but it was something.
I find it, though, kind of weird that you would say that you were watching a show and it's just a bunch of craziness.
We're talking
your daughter speaking.
Does she remember any of that?
No, nothing. So here's the rest of the story then. Fast forward about 6 months. No episodes of The Wind. You kind of forget about it. Maybe you tell somebody about it, but it's just like, oh God, life's good. Everything's good. So we went to church, and me and a couple other families who had kids, we decided we're going to go to the Chinese buffet out there in the plaza. It's now shut down, I guess. Mm-hmm. And so I always sat with the kids because I wanted to make sure the kids didn't do something. I was always one of those parents, like, I don't want my kid to do something stupid.
He's the helicopter parent.
Yeah. So, yeah. So you got all the parents. I mean, you're talking. There's like 15 people, and they push tables together. On one end, you got all the parents, and on the other end, you got, I don't know, probably 6 kids at least. So I'm sitting on the end with all the kids, and I'm at the end of the table because I'm a big guy and I don't want to be crunched in between a couple of kids. So I'm sitting at the end of the table, and my youngest daughter's right across from me, and we're sitting there eating. And all of a sudden, her head just jerks, like she saw something. Like her head just jerks. And she says, I'll never forget this because my blood just ran cold. I mean, it just ran cold. She goes, Wind, what are you doing here? And I'm like, oh, God, no. It's back. Like it has followed it. It has found her. And then you could just tell that
you're for the buffet. What are you doing?
Yeah, what are you doing? What do you expect?
It's the crab legs.
Yeah. So, but you could tell that, I mean, I was looking at her face and you could tell she was seeing something and talking to something. And like because I remember saying, Wind, what are you doing here? Like she was shocked that it was there. And it was talking to her because I could tell, like, when you somebody's facial expressions when someone's talking, they're acknowledging something, and she's sitting there listening to it. Of course, I can't hear anything. And all of a sudden, she goes, okay, and just goes right back to eating. And I remember saying, did you just see Wind? And she goes, yeah, but don't worry about it. It's good. Like he's not bothering me. And so I got home that night, and I was thoroughly convinced he was going to show back up, and he never did. So fast forward about, I don't know, year maybe, if that, maybe not. I don't know. I can't tell you. And I'm sitting at my desk at work, and Yahoo was my user page or whatever, and the story pops up about this 3-year-old kid who was living in like Toronto. It was winter. And was living in these apartment complexes, pretty nice, This 3-year-old kid gets up in the middle of the night, walks out his front door, takes the elevator down to the lobby, walks out the lobby, walks 3 blocks away to a park, and freezes to death at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And when I read that story, it hit me. It's Wind. Oh. It was Wind, or something like Wind, that had lured this kid to go outside and play in the winter, killed him, frozen. And so I remember thinking, that's exactly what this thing was trying to do to my daughter. Mm-hmm. It was trying to get her to go outside in the middle of winter to lure her off to play, and she was frozen to death and died. Mm-hmm. And so I have told this story to new parents, and people say, well, why did you tell that story? That's terrible. You're scaring them. I said, I'm not trying to scare them. It's a cautionary tale. I'm trying to, tell people that, look, if your kid tells you that they see something and it's talking to them, believe it. Mm-hmm. Don't just chalk this up as imaginary friend. Don't just chalk this up as, they have a wild imagination. Because I really believe that there are things out there. There are forces. And by the way, I've talked to some people, and nobody believes that was a little boy. Nobody believes that was a little boy.
It's super interesting is watching you guys listen to this story. Okay, number one, knowing that you guys lived through 10 years of craziness. Number two, knowing that it happened 150 yards from your house. And number three, knowing that you guys living there at the end had a young daughter. And to see, because there's people listening that have never had anything happen to them and are just like, whatever. You guys are, but you guys are like listening to this like, Jesus Christ, I know exactly what he's talking about, and that could have been us.
Well, and
it's just like,
and you're thinking, what was it doing at the Chinese buffet?
Yeah.
Was it looking for kids?
Yeah, because that place has a terrible health code.
It clearly would have
violations.
been about
All the
code
time.
violations.
And why would you go there? You would go there. It's like the Ozark Howler says. If you're gonna be a ghost, well, I'm not gonna haunt the Chinese buffet. I'm going to Hawaii and hanging out at a luau.
Right.
That's what he always says.
But what I think and what I believe is that there's these things out there. They're not children. They come looking like children to lure your kids out, and they're out there everywhere. You may not be able to see them, but they're out there. I mean, how many people were eating lunch that day at the Chinese buffet, and one person saw it? Only one. My daughter, because she had So you could be anywhere.
But how do you know? She was the only person that saw it. Because
remember
when I told my experience at the post office,
right.
where I thought it was just like, what if somebody else was looking over and saying,
maybe they saw
the judge's kid is
and
talking to this other little kid.
I think some people are more sensitive to it than others.
Well, the other thing is why, and I try to figure this out too. Why was it that the only time I saw it was that night? Like I had been in the room with her, and she says he's right there, he's standing there, and I couldn't see it. But on this particular night, on this particular moment, I saw it. Now, when I went into her room, he was gone. By the time and I'm telling you, and I know it sounds silly, but I just froze. I just froze in my seat, and just all I could do was just listen. And while this thing just played out.
Well, a lot of times I wonder when you hear these stories, if they don't want to be seen, and it's totally, you see him by total accident.
Yeah.
Maybe he only wanted your daughter to see him, and you seeing him was just total accident. Just like you guys kind of never saw that lady's face, but you would see bits and pieces of her, and
for whatever reason, whoever was in the picture, that's who it was.
Yeah, the dress.
I don't know.
So now and we talked about this before. What's going on in that little
geographic area that you're talking about,
North Central Ohio?
Well, and the thing is, in like that experience with my youngest daughter, Wind, I mean, how did it attach itself to her? Where were we that it attaches? Or was it drawn to this geographical area? What is it about this area that is attracting these things? And how far does that go? I mean, we're just talking about this little stretch of road in a country road in Crawford County that
it's 4 miles wide.
Yeah, because like I said, I told you my dad, the house he grew up in, he would tell me just crazy stories, that things that he saw and heard and things like that.
Think of the people that lived there after them, the weird stuff they.
Yeah.
Well, and then when you guys are saying that you had the ghost hunters come in, and the second guy brought in what he believed to be a dark spirit. Wonder what the time
That's
frame
what I
is.
was just thinking.
Is what if that dark spirit goes into you guys' house and you guys take off and it's mad, and this spirit or entity thinks, there's a little girl over there. They're burning. They're burning.
They're burning toys out there.
They're burning toys out there. Dogs are taking craps in the. And you wonder how that all can tie together.
Have you talked to the people that live in the house now? They have a lot of kids.
Well, I know who those people are, but no one has ever.
But you wouldn't say, you would not.
But would you say? I mean, who's going to come out and say that? So, like some of the other things that happened in that house that were unrelated to those things was one night I was in the house by myself, and I went and ran into town and went to Arby's because they were Hardee's because they were the only place that was open. I was hungry, And so I got
You
in
must
bed.
have really been hungry.
Oh yeah. So I get in bed and I drink. You know how Hardee's has the biggest drink you can get. It's way
The
too
55 gallon Dr. Pepper.
big. Yeah. So I didn't drink all of it.
Right.
I set it in the bathroom, and I get in bed. And I'm laying there in bed, and all of a sudden, something starts just blowing bubbles in it, and you can hear it. And they're like, "Oh my gosh, like what is?" And then one night I'm there, and the bedroom door. I'm sitting at the bedroom door. There's nobody there. Somebody just grabs the bedroom door and just slams it shut. I mean, as hard as you could imagine being slammed. Now, there were no windows open. There's no drafts that could have caught it. I mean, it slammed so hard that like pictures on the wall just shook. And I was convinced there was somebody in the house. I mean, I was convinced there was somebody in the house. I roll off the bed. I'm thinking, okay, where do I have a weapon? I got to get my hands on a weapon. And I just kind of laid there real still listening to see if I can hear whoever this perpetrator is moving throughout the house. And I bet I laid there in complete silence for a half hour on the floor, like, okay, because I really think there's a person in this house, and I don't have a gun by my bed at that time. I didn't have any weapon that at my disposal. I'm thinking, okay, how's this going to play out? And then I'm sitting there thinking, well, why would they were going to attack me? Why would they just slam the door as large as they could? And then I just listened, nothing. And then I realized, wait a minute, I've got a home security system. Home security system didn't go off. So, so I get up, I go downstairs, home security system is fully functional. Nobody was in that house. No person was in that house. And so, and you're thinking to yourself, I built this house. This is not a haunted house that I moved into. What is it? But then what we're talking about now is there a magnetism to this small little geographical area? And once again, how far does that thing go out? Like if where's the center of this energy? If we said the center of that energy somewhere on Beach Grove Road, which we don't know, and you start trying to circle out, how far does that thing go? How far does it go? We don't know because most people don't tell.
I mean, like, what are the chances you'd have come up to me last weekend and said, hey, by the way, we lived in this house. It was just, it's not something you're just going to, and like I said, I've known you since you were like 6 years old. Okay. And it's not like a conversation we ever had.
Right.
And I mean, we've talked quite a bit over the last couple of
And that never came up.
It never came up.
When you think about it, go back to when that was happening. There was not this prevalent movement for the paranormal.
Right.
I mean, now you can't turn on the TV if you've got cable or satellite and not find some sort of show at that time that happens to be on either the Travel Channel, Destination America, Sci-Fi. And so I think where we're at now in society is people have come to accept that these things are real, or these things, people are experiencing things. Whereas in the past, you just didn't tell people because you didn't want to be called a liar, you don't want to be called a kook or be ostracized or something like that.
Which is crazy, because if you really understood how many people experience something that's unexplained, then it'd seem a lot more normal, and then maybe people could get answers. Because since we've started the podcast, I mean, you guys are not the only people that have reached out to me personally. I mean, I've had somebody's reached out to me who I would never in a million years think that anything happened to them, or they would even believe it. And they've told me stories that I just had to stop reading them because I'm like, this is just too crazy. And they would never. And I've asked them, would you like to come on? Nope. I'm not ready. I'm not ready to do that.
I'm not ready to put myself, subject myself to that
but
sort of.
And the thing is we, like Jason, we've talked this before. He'd love to have some paranormal stuff happen to him. Jerry has had some stuff. The judge, obviously, Ozark Howler, doesn't believe in anything. Okay,
right.
I've had some things, so it's not like well, if you want to come talk to us, we're going to say, oh, you're crazy. Because we're different levels of understanding of what is going on,
like
as much as we can understand.
Like my dog man encounter. I didn't really tell people the whole story on that until I picked up a book that Linda Gottfried had wrote, and I read in there that since the 80s, which is when I experienced it, there's been over 2,500 accountings
That
and
have been reported.
Yeah, have been reported. And now you're thinking, well, gee, Christmas, maybe I'm not so unique. This happens a lot more than what people, than what people will ever tell. So if there's actually 2,500 that she knew of, I mean, that's just ones that she knew of. You don't even know about the ones where somebody saw something, came back and told their cousin, their family, or something, and it never somehow got into the channels. You're talking probably tens of thousands of dog.
Like how many other people in that area have had stuff happen?
Well, yeah, and you think, okay, so this happened on Temple Road. Was there anybody else that's ever lived on Temple Road that saw this thing, experienced this thing?
It's probably one of the more remote stretches in Crawford County, right through there where you were talking.
Yeah, exactly. When you take into consideration, there's a lot of backcountry. We'd call that a backcountry road, even though it's between two.
But there's some
state highways.
Where there's a mile between a house.
Yeah,
there is. I mean, when you go from Route 4 to
19.
Well, you go from Route 4 to the first crossroad you come to is Flickinger. Yeah. There's one house. At that time, there was one house, a tree that I could not scale, if you remember. And then you go from Flickinger to Eaton Road, and I'm not even sure there is a house. And then once you get past Eaton, you had, I'm not going to mention their names, but you had two houses. And that's it, all the way to 19. So you're talking about a 2.5 mile stretch from Route 4 to 19, because it was 2.5 miles back then, at least when I measured it with the odometer of my car. Didn't have GPS units back then. But you're talking about 2.5 miles, and there is a total of maybe 3 houses back then. I think there's more now. But there was 3 houses.
And Tim and I totally understand what it's like to grow up where there's nothing. Because
our 3 houses, 2 on our mile and 1 on the corner.
Yeah, 200 mile, and I mean,
during that stretch, you had over 1.5 miles of cornfield. You had I don't know how big that woods, how many acre woods that is, but it wasn't
where
tiny.
They built all the houses.
Yeah, that's where, because that's it's where that woods was, and Flickinger is where that whole dogman encounter starts. So I don't know if this thing was in the woods, because keep in mind I went down first, hit 19, I was on my way back. My guess is it was there. It's probably saw me or sniffed me or acknowledged me, and then said, "Okay, I don't know who this is." What
have you run this before?
Yeah, I ran before. Oh yeah,
so
I'd done that.
It could have seen you run.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I mean,
I'm going to get a snack.
I had done. Yeah, maybe.
This guy's not very fast. I think I can catch him.
Yeah, to this day, I still.
The problem was back then you were so skinny you wouldn't even worth the trouble.
I wouldn't even
like
been
now.
hors d'oeuvre.
Yeah, like now I can see the dog man being like, I get that. That's 4 days worth. Right?
Yeah, drag me off.
Hey, look, I don't know, guys. I think that there's something with that area. I don't know if it's vibrational, or I don't know if maybe there's a certain energy emanating from there, but there's definitely something to it. It would be kind of nice to be able to figure out how far out it goes.
Well, I suggested to Grover that we just get a map of the area and we start pinpointing areas where you're scared there's going to be a pentagram.
Like a pentagram or ye all shall die or something.
Well, that's good to know. You see that right there, we can find that out. And then from that point on, we can do some history. We can investigate and see what has happened. Yeah, we can find out what has happened on that land before the recent recorded history.
Right here.
Well, I think the perfect person to go and put themselves in harm's way to try to figure that out is Jerry, because he has all the tricks.
Yeah, you can go in and cleanse. Don't cleanse it first though, because you got to experience it. You don't want to cleanse it first.
That's right. You guys are fast to throw me under the bus.
No, first of all, what
you're
we
very
need to do is
excited.
investigate this area. There's been just a lot of paranormal activity you guys have just discussed today. And we don't know if there's other people.
Right. So how many other no, there's not that many houses in this area, but how many other houses? If you if you knock on somebody's door, would they actually even tell you, admit that they?
Right.
Well, I'm curious.
Some of these people, I'm pretty sure, would not.
The next door neighbors, the ones that like the light, have they seen that light? That would be a good question.
We're going to see them next week.
Yeah, we'll see them next. We'll ask them.
There you go.
Yeah.
That'd be a good place. That'd be a good place to start. Just say, hey, since we moved out, and then did you guys ever notice that light still there? Because you guys had that conversation with them while you still lived there, that it was not a light hanging up.
Right.
So what? I guess we never. What did they say when you said, "Hey, look, that's not a light. That's an orb"?
They were interested. They wanted to hear more stories.
Yeah.
Of course, they didn't think we were crazy or anything.
Now, have they ever experienced anything over at their house?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
they would have told us had they, because they were really into hearing our stories.
Or maybe they're so into your stories because they were experiencing stuff and they wanted
There
to
you
compare.
go. That's my
compare
thoughts
notes.
exactly. I'm thinking here at the From the Shadows podcast, we need to be that forum for those people that have experienced things so they can reach out and talk to other people. Or even if we can't help them, we can at least be the sounding board that they can get this off of their chest. Something so they can talk about it, and then maybe with the reach of our audience, we can come across somebody else that have experienced this. That happened to me just in a conversation when I was talking about you, Judge. And
Really?
there's a guy that I work with. He's been out to prison for 28 years. He's the guy that helped me produce the wrestling podcast that I was doing. Now he wants involved because of you. I was telling him about you. The things that you have experienced. He's experienced similar things, and he's never been able to talk to anybody about it. He says, I try to talk to you, and he says a couple other people, but he says it's like trying to explain something to somebody in a different language where they just cannot understand.
Well, it's kind of like trying to go in when you're in elementary school and explaining to your teacher why you didn't get your homework done. And the first thing they give you is that look. And I've been there, and I've kind of told this story, the wind story, to people because, like I said, it's a cautionary tale. You got children. And I know within 10 seconds if the person thinks I'm just a nut or making this up because they have this look on their face, like the same look that the howler has on his.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, sure. So
ultimate skepticism.
Ultimate skepticism, because I think it's one of those things that until you experience it firsthand, until you've actually had this happen to you, it's difficult for people to wrap their brain around it and fully accept it. I mean, I would say probably if you did and I've seen the stat, but I couldn't tell you what it was. How many people today, if you polled 1,000 people and did a sampling and says, do you believe in ghosts? How many people would say yes?
Oh.
I think it would be a lot more than what there was 20 years ago.
Oh, absolutely.
I was a reporter for the Telegraph Forum when we first got married. And so this stuff was happening. So I wanted at Halloween time to do this series on, haunted houses, paranormal
Sure.
in our area. So I over and over again put a notice in the paper because people actually read it at that time. That was really kind of before the internet had taken off and people were reading just on the internet. I would put something in there quite often asking for people to call me at the office to give me these stories and I could come out and investigate all this stuff. Nothing. No one called. So people were not talking about it.
No.
They were afraid to. And I would hear from so-and-so that this person had an experience, and I'd go and try to talk to them. They would not speak to me about it. But I think nowadays, with ghost hunters and all that kind of stuff.
Well, and you may remember this was way before you guys' time. I do remember them running a story in the Telegraph Forum about a house in Bucyrus.
It's on Mansfield Street, wasn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah,
that was supposed to be super haunted, and
Yeah.
it was okay.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember, and I remember my grandparents talking about this and just kind of laughing it off.
Oh yeah, people
And
bashed it.
and what I think it happened was there was such the rather than we're going to bring this to light and try, I think people just made so much fun of it and you're crazy and you're nuts and
I would think there were people that probably believed it but would not admit that they believed it. So you're like, I'm not going to admit that I really believe this, so I'm going to laugh and make fun of it, even though deep down inside I'm like, maybe this is really real. But I think,
because nobody wants to admit their vulnerability.
Well,
Right.
a lot of people, that's a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
They can't figure it out, so they're scared of it, so they make fun of it.
Yeah.
When I worked at the TF building, the old building, is very haunted. We've both seen things there. And I wanted to write about that, and they would not let me.
And the one thing that I saw, I knew the guy way before
The guy that worked,
the guy that worked there. I knew him,
he had died in a
and you wouldn't
tragic
even have
accident.
known it was a
Oh.
ghost if I hadn't have known that he died.
You
Oh,
could
wow.
see
You know,
right
he
down to
just
his khaki pants.
He just walked across
Wow.
the hallway
Yeah.
like he was working.
I saw him. I
Similar
looked in
to
the
like
door
that
one
little
night and saw
girl
him.
at the post office.
Yeah. And I probably know who you're talking about. You're talking about the reporter who was.
No,
He was
Oh,
an ad guy.
he was an
Oh,
ad
it was
guy.
an ad guy. Okay.
His
All
name
right.
was Jim, but I know who you're talking about.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I worked with the guy that you're talking about.
You know, I never did finish.
I bet
Yeah.
he's still there. Yeah,
I never
don't
did
know.
finish the Quaker Roads story. That's
We'll save that for another
okay.
time. We'll save that for another time.
Well, why don't
So-
we go ahead and sign off, Jerry and Jason Grover, and thank our guests for being here today.
And we'd like to throw it back out there to anybody who's listening. Feel free to get a hold of us on our Instagram page, our Twitter page, or Twitter account. You can send us a message through Facebook, and you can get a hold of me on Messenger and Facebook, or
Or you can email us.
Yeah,
Email it from
email
the
us.
Shadows Podcast
Yeah.
at Yahoo.
And if you want to
Or
come
the
up
Ohio
to me,
Howler
yeah.
at Outlook.com.
And if you would just, if you want to come up to me like Tim and Charma did and just say, hey, I got a good story for you, we would love to talk to you on the air or even off the air.
Yeah.
So,
Don't think that if you
no.
tell us something that we're going to absolutely share it. If you don't want us to share it, if you just want to talk to somebody, bounce it off somebody, we're all ears.
because it certainly helps fill in some of the blanks when we're trying to look at the full picture of what could possibly be going on, especially here in North Central Ohio.
There you have it, folks. I would like to thank you all for listening to this exciting interview with our very special guests, Tim and Charma. Here at the From the Shadows podcast, we encourage you to contact us and to share an experience or suggest a place that you would like us to investigate and bring to light from the shadows. Please visit our new Facebook discussion group called After the Shadows. You can listen to the From the Shadows podcast on Spotify, Stitcher, and Apple Podcasts. I'm Jason Lewis, the producer. Make sure to tune in for next week's episode of the From the Shadows podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, let me turn you back over to your host, Shane Grove, with a final word from this week's sponsor.
We here at From the Shadows podcast would like to thank a new sponsor for joining us, Tiffin Dynamic Design, where owners Paul and Christy Landers can fill all of your t-shirt, team jersey, and other personalized advertising needs. In fact, I am here today picking up some official From the Shadows podcast t-shirts. And what does the shirt say? Is that a picture of Jerry? What? Jerry for President 2020? Oh boy. Well, anyway, like I said, they can do about everything here at Tiffin Dynamic Design except probably get Jerry elected. Wait till I see Paul.
And for now, we are out.